bist du sie aller Ehre. Was ist Wundes hier geschehen? Dass ein Magd ein Kind gebar, ihre über aller Engel Schar. Was das nicht ein Wunder gab.
This is The New Right, a podcast for the lost arts, reclaiming the literary holy land from the heathen. This is Dan Baltic.
And this is Matt Pegas.
And this is episode 28.
29.
Episode 29. And this is what we are probably going to title the Top Gun Nationalism episode, because we have both recently seen, well, both the original Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick. And, it's having a moment, isn't it, Matt?
Definitely. I mean, it's, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it broke Memorial Day box office weekend records, which for a time when supposedly a time when people are in fact going to the movies less is even more striking. And it's just kind of having a moment where you're not really hearing much that's negative about it. Some of this is somewhat contrived by the MSM, which we'll get into, the mainstream media, but it's kind of being presented as like this unifying moment for everyone, for moviegoers, for people on different sides of the political aisle, whatever. And even though I do think some of that's contrived, my take on it is I would not stand in the way of that. I liked Top Gun Maverick a lot myself. And if libs and sort of cringy military, neocon types, and if everyone finds something to like in it, in this case, I wouldn't argue against that. I think that it is just pure cinematic fun, and it's nostalgic. So more power to
Tom Cruise bringing us together. He is arguably the last really big movie star. Someone you look at him and you're like, that guy, he's a star, and everyone knows him. And like the younger stars, or I don't know, like I guess Timothée Chalamet is well known. Yeah. But like I feel like it's all like very in the way that Netflix has kind of scattered and atomized everything. There's no American movie star that everyone knows anymore from the younger generation.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Tom Cruise is a dying breed here. And that is definitely a theme of the movie.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a very fortuitous tie-in there.
Definitely.
I wasn't even planning.
Right. It definitely, there's an element to this movie, sort of like in the Quentin Tarantino movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where it's like Leo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, who would also, be mentioned in the same breath, I guess, as Tom Cruise. So I do think Tom Cruise is ultimately the bigger star, but not even to measure them against each other. There is this kind of not quite breaking the fourth wall, but nevertheless some interesting reflection on real life, where if Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was about these two sort of aging, an actor and a stuntman, who were kind of starting to feel alienated by a new Hollywood of the burgeoning 70s, 1969 into 1970. There's an element where it was like they were aging, they were starting to feel alienated from the changes that were going on in Hollywood then. And of course, in the context of 2019, when the movie came out, you could say the same thing, that these were two older white gentlemen who were sort of past their prime, quote unquote, or not necessarily past their artistic prime, but past their
cultural prime,
past their place in the limelight. And I think a similar sort of art imitating life thing is at play with Top Gun Maverick, where Tom Cruise is an older actor, Maverick is an older pilot, and there's this, as you said, he's literally told in the movie that he's a dying breed, and to which his reply that his kind is going extinct And his reply is, maybe, but not today. And then he proceeds to be a badass for the next hour and a half.
It was a good line.
Yeah, definitely a good line. And yeah, it's just art imitating life to a certain degree, for sure.
And not only is it kind of fortuitous, the tie in there about him being a dying breed and the how that kind of reflects on the culture. It's also fortuitous that we are even doing this and talking about it, because we had planned this Top Gun nationalism episode before Maverick was even on our radar, because we came across it when we were at Eris's apartment.
Right.
And
yes, very strange story, but
yeah,
indeed very serendipitous.
For some reason, I forget why, I mentioned that in the year of my birth, 1986, I'm dating myself now, but Top Gun was the top grossing film in America. Probably not the world, but maybe the world. It was certainly in America. It was the top grossing film.
Probably the world.
Probably. And and so like we started talking about it, and then I was staying at your place, and we just decided to have a bro movie night and watch Top Gun.
Well, I think part of it was that I admitted that I'd never seen it.
That's right.
I admitted that I wanted to see it, and we were just in maybe a night or two after that podcast we did with Eris, with Elizabeth Aldrich, I was just like, let's put on a movie. Let's see if Top Gun's streaming. It was, and we watched it, and it was kind of a memorable movie night. I was glad I had finally seen it, and I did have some concept that there was a new one coming out that I knew I'd actually heard. So, and this goes into the context of Top Gun Maverick as well. The movie was delayed, I think, almost 2 years due to the pandemic, and I'd heard it was actually Nick Pizzolatto, the True Detective creator, was on Bret Easton Ellis's podcast, which I'm a religious listener of. This in itself was almost 2 years ago now, and had said he'd seen a pre-screening of Top Gun Maverick and thought it was breathtaking. And, this is the guy who made True Detective. He's got kind of dark view on things. This isn't someone who would say such a thing lightly. And I was like, I got to see that, kind of for some of the reasons we were getting at. Like, it was interesting to me that there would be a movie about an older white guy doing older white guy things, doing badass things. Yeah. And I was like, okay, this is going to be one to see, but I got to see the original Top Gun before. So I'd earmarked it, and then it came up at Eris's, and the rest was fate.
So it was really cool for me to watch you watch it for the first time, because like it's always great to watch a movie that you like with someone else's first experience.
I feel like your son right now, but
but in addition to that, it was interesting because I didn't remember it exactly as it was, or as I experienced it now, because like the last time I saw it was probably like 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And watching it now, I guess this is a testament to how much more sophisticated I've become in my elder years. But watching it, I was like, I recognized how incredibly cheesy it is, but also hilarious. Like I remember it being like a little kind of like over the top, on the nose, with like the super machismo, but like it's so on the nose that it's really very funny. Yeah. And so it both, like, what I was struck by watching it the second time, or not the second time, but watching it recently, was the unintentional but hilarious cheesiness, and the kind of like the naive patriotism of it, the kind of optimistic mood of the movie, which is clearly reflective of the era in which it was made.
That was my overwhelming takeaway from watching the original Top Gun was, wow, this was peak Empire. Culturally, again, on Bret Easton Ellis podcast talks about Empire as like a cultural movement where boomers were in control and everything was kind of maximalist, and and optimistic, but also literally like American empire, is right on the cusp of supposed Cold War victory. And that kind of optimism was the air. And yeah, that was my overwhelming take, is like how optimistic must have this moment been that there was a movie, and it was the biggest movie in America, as you said. It's a military movie, but there's not a lot of direct combat until the end. It's mostly just about military training. And the main source of conflict is this character Maverick, and the question being, is he too much of a maverick? Is he too much of a badass? Imagine that's such a great, and I don't mean this negatively because I'm not a leftist, or whatever. I think it is pretty badass, and I'm sure it was a nice moment to live through. There's a kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, you have to call it narcissism. But not necessarily a totally bad narcissism, more like a youthful, optimistic narcissism of its cultural product, which is like it's looking at itself. You basically that was America's view on itself at that time. Maybe during the Reagan era, etc., was considering like we are badass and we're highly equipped, but like how badass is too badass? How maverick is too maverick, that these were the considerations, that was the source of tension.
The conceit being like that Maverick is too much of a maverick, and the movie is the original Top Gun trying to decide, is that okay? Is that, but I mean, and this is interesting on an even deeper philosophical level, as we've discussed in the notes. I think, and maybe I'm running with this a little too much, but I think the original Top Gun is kind of a, even if unintentionally, a study in the personality of old America, pre-Empire America, and the ethos or personality of the American Empire.
Yeah,
and that is embodied in Maverick, who is an old school American, in that he is what let's call it what it is. He's a Sigma. He's a Sigma.
Yeah.
He's like, he has that pioneer spirit, doesn't play by the rules, does what he wants. And that was the country America was until like basically World War II, arguably World War I. But like in any case, throughout most of America's existence, we were just out there doing our own thing. And like we were a wild card. No one knew what the fuck we were going to do with regard to anything. And that was like the beauty of America. America was that kind of, and that was like when we went into World War II, obviously the Germans are our foes, not our, friends in the war. Allies didn't remark on this as much, but they would remark that the American fighting spirit was just almost suicidally insane.
Yeah.
They just they just were undisciplined but like extremely brave. And that is like exactly like, that's the Maverick spirit. That's his spirit in Top Gun. He's like suicidally brave. He's got to go for it. He's like, but his flaw is the flaw of old America, of, pre-Empire America, which is, not, if you're a Maverick, you're not as disciplined. You're not as, you can't be a disciplined Maverick. And so Maverick's counter, his foil in this is obviously Iceman. And Iceman is the alpha to Maverick's Sigma.
Yeah. Played by Val Kilmer. He is also like a badass. He doesn't have beta tendencies. He's got, as you said, alpha tendencies, but he's a lot more by the book. He's a lot more predictable. He's a lot more dependable, maybe. And yeah, just that. Basically, it comes down to, what would you say, being more by the rules.
Not only more by the rules, he's also like he beats Maverick in all of the tests, like all of the flying tests. He is the best. Yeah. And the alpha is always the best. Or almost always. Probably because if you're more disciplined, you will be better than the Sigma. You will be more better. You will be better than the Maverick, because you will fuck up less because you have more discipline. And that's what Val Kilmer is. He's
Right.
the Iceman.
Yeah, and you're more popular with the the higher
establishment.
Well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's seen in their, what they look like. Maverick is Tom Cruise, dark, not like dark, but
I know
darker looks. Whereas, Iceman is like
ice
blonde
tips.
and blue eyes.
Yeah.
And so like one of them's the Sigma, the other one's the Alpha, and that corresponds to the change in American presence on the national stage.
Yeah.
And America after World War II, certainly arguably after World War I, became an alpha on the world stage, the big dog. Everyone, certainly after World War II, like we ran the show. We still arguably in some sense run the show. And that is the persona, no longer unpredictable. I mean, we had 4 years of maybe some unpredictability recently.
Yeah.
But now we're back to being, predictably, evil.
Yeah. Well, if we were to continue the metaphor, it's like we're alpha now, but in this sort of bloated boomer way.
Sclerotic.
Will it? What's the word?
Sclerotic.
Will it last? I don't know. We can get more onto that in America's current role in the world, perhaps later. But yeah, it is interesting to think of it that way, that America kind of would have risen into that sort of alpha status and what that would mean now in a postmodern context. Maybe Trump's a sort of aesthetic honesty about what we still could be in almost the best light, whereas what we actually are, well, something a little more shadowy. But no, in terms of Top Gun, I think you can definitely read the movie on that level that you mentioned, where I guess part of what you'd be saying is even in 1986 that there was a sort of nostalgia, or not even nostalgia, but even in 1986 Maverick's type was a sort of not
a throwback to the older America,
right.
But I mean, we've always had that. We've always like Rebel Without a Cause,
right?
But it's always been, but it's increasingly something that's like celebrated less and less.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? This actually, we didn't talk about this in the notes, but I think it's an astute point. Hopefully, I won't listen back over and be like, "What was that? That was a reach." But so there's a kind of a cliche about 80s movies and maybe before, but especially 80s movies, Karate Kid, which I do love that movie. So I'm not really trying to completely call it paused or anything. But there's a certain cliche about 80s movies that they kind of have these like more swarthy underdog protagonists fighting against the blonde and blue-eyed alpha types, and the whole notion is that like this is somehow some kind of fetishization of like the non-white underdog, perpetrated by Hollywood.
I can't imagine Hollywood doing that.
Yeah. I think there's a truth to that. Hollywood is very guilty of doing that all the time, and that a lot of it did start in the 80s. And again, I do love Karate Kid. I like the new Karate Kid too, so I'm not totally slamming it down. But definitely you could see that in a movie like Karate Kid. I don't think it quite applies at all to Top Gun. Val Kilmer has the lighter hair or whatever, but like, no, Tom Cruise is also very much like a clean cut. I mean, there's no one better embodies the all-American look than Tom Cruise, from the 80s to like now. So it was it was a little bit of an underdog story, but it was a different kind of underdog story, more like Rebel with the Cause, a little more classical, and that it had to do with that. What we would call a Sigma fighting spirit versus,
alpha game,
or just sort of prim and proper by the bookness. But yeah, no, and in that sense, it's praiseworthy for Top Gun to kind of delve more into that.
And praiseworthy because we always appreciate watching a movie from the 80s or a movie from the 90s where they they do and say like natural stuff that people used to do and say in real life, but now is like, you can't have in movies anymore.
Right.
And like, if you do or say those things in real life, you lose your job. And
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, not like Top Gun was like wildly unwoke, but like there are certain things that like, you know, they obviously don't have in Maverick, which they had in Top Gun.
Yes, and we have been reminded of these. And I mean, it's not the overwhelming narrative about Top Gun or Top Gun Maverick, but definitely, you know, you look at some CNN op-eds, these will be rehashed there as well. But continue.
Yeah.
The bathroom scene.
I was going to rehash them. The the bathroom scene, like, so to paint the scene, I mean, everyone has probably seen Top Gun, but if you haven't, they go to a sailor's bar, and in a scene that kind of presciently predicts the pickup artist culture, they literally like enter the bar, and I think Goose, who is Maverick's wingman, literal wingman, says like, it's a target-rich environment, and it's like one of the cheesy lines.
Yeah, right. They're talking about planes, but they're also talking about
a metaphor for women. And so they find like an open woman, an open, you know, target. And so Maverick goes up to her, and you know, he breaks into song. He starts singing, "You lost that loving feeling." And like initially she's like kind of put off, but then she's just like won over by how incredibly goofy and confident and ballsy he is. And his friend sings along, the whole bar starts singing along. Yeah. And so this is kind of like it's something that, you know, would be, I guess maybe you could have it in a movie today. I don't know, but it's very like in between Top Gun and today. We had the whole manosphere, the pickup artist culture. And like this, you know, from today's eyes, you look at it and you go, this is a routine. This is, but I mean, but it's what I think this misconstrues is that pickup artist techniques and stuff are rooted in human nature.
Oh yeah. It does misconstrue.
It's a routine, but it's a routine. It was before
that no one had
it was
to
a
think
routine.
About. Yeah.
Before it was a routine, it was just something that people did. Exactly. And something that like not every guy did, but the guys who were confident enough to would. And so, yeah, I don't know if that would make it in today. But yeah, he's definitely doing like, you know, straight up like a master class in pickup artistry. And so it goes pretty well. But like he strikes out for some reason. That didn't make sense to me. Like he does this like crazy, you know, like singing to her, and she's like a good looking guy, and they have charisma. But I forget why. She's just like, yeah, I gotta go.
Oh, she's hard to get, you know.
I suppose.
Yeah.
But not only, well, she is hard to get, but Maverick is not easily dissuaded. Right. So Maverick, he like sees her. I forget, maybe there's a beat where he's not, you know, he's doing something else. Then he sees her go into the bathroom. And that's when like Maverick being the Maverick that he is, doing unconventional things, he follows her into the bathroom. And very, very Sigma male move. He's in there in the bathroom, and she's like, this is the women's room. What the fuck are you doing in here?
Yeah.
And Maverick just says, I think she and, you know, her being a kind of like ballsy woman says, are you gonna fuck me on the sink? And he looks at the sink, and he kind of like taps it and like tests to see if it could hold. And he goes, yeah, maybe this could work. And so suffice to say, he does not actually fuck her on the sink. But like, that's the type of like line that's the type of scene that,
it wouldn't be in there. You ask, would the singing be in there? I mean, I think it could. Is a little less in fashion to show that kind of thing, but the bathroom scene is a hard dated element.
That would be. I mean, in truth, you know, maybe some things are, you know, meant to be left in the past. Like I'm certainly no Me Too guy, but you probably shouldn't follow her in the bathroom.
But listen, like also there's two issues with you know, quote unquote PC stuff. Is like, on the one hand, sometimes PC stuff goes after stuff that like is not even problematic at all. And then the other amount of the time it's just no fun. And I don't necessarily think everyone who watched Top Gun in the 80s would actually have thought that would be a good idea in most cases. The whole point of the movie was that it was a fantasy and that it was fun, especially in a movie like Top Gun, which, as you said, is very stylized, is very funny. Who could forget? And obviously everyone talks about this now as quote unquote homoerotic, which I don't necessarily agree with the characterization of, but the volleyball scene, it's all about that kind of aesthetic fantasy, so to speak. And
no, absolutely.
There's part of the issue with political correctness beyond it's the politics are wrong, but like, so is the correctness, it's also just no fun. And which is why you have people who are pretty liberal who are also against it. But I guess not to anticipate the shift in the conversation too much, but I would say one thing that I would praise Top Gun Maverick for is that it, and you may not agree with this as much as I do, but I think it did a pretty good job of recapturing the fun of the original movie with some of the aesthetics. Certainly, a lot of people would say the script is quote unquote better. The dialogue is a little less on the nose. I think, as you said, some of the corniness of the original script is what makes it so fun. But nevertheless, even in the new script, it delivers on its promise. And there's a lot of, I was satisfied with a lot of like, not match cuts, but, there seemed to be a conscious effort to bring a lot of the elements from the original one back into the new one, from the romance and the Tom Cruise driving a girl around on a bike in the old movie. It's I don't even know what that actress's name is, to be honest, although
which one
in the original?
Older, that was Kelly McGinnis.
Right.
There's an anecdote, but keep going.
Well, there's the thing about the meme, which we'll talk about. But anyway, Tom Cruise drove Kelly McGinnis around on a bike in the original. Tom Cruise drives Jennifer Connelly around on a bike in the new one. The volleyball scene becomes a sort of beach football scene. They did a good job of not, there's definitely no bathroom scene, but most other memorable scenes kind of have their analog in the new one, which I was happy about.
So while I was happy that it, and we'll touch on this more a little bit later, it was not woke. It was the Top Gun Maverick was a kind of like fun action movie starring a white guy who's allowed to be heroic and a proud American. Right. And that's like something that is kind of rare these days. So like, my hat is off to the movie for that. And we'll talk more about that. From kind of an aesthetic standpoint, like the part of the charm of Top Gun to me is the cheesy dialogue, how incredibly, perhaps it was unintentional, but people say The Room by Tommy Wiseau is a masterpiece. And like, I'm sure the whole point is Tommy didn't realize he was making it a masterpiece, that it was so bad that it was good. But like, nevertheless, people think it is. And I think Top Gun is. I think that it's like the dialogue is just so like, the one that sticks out to me is when Tom Cruise is like, he's challenged in some way. He and Goose are challenged in some way by the wingman for Iceman, Slider. And, he has to come up with a rejoinder or retort. And so he walks over to Slider and like, you wonder what he's going to say. You wonder if he's going to grab him by like the scruff of the neck or whatever. But no, he leans in, he sniffs Slider, just like he gets a real whiff of him. And he goes, Slider, you stink. It's just the most hilarious fucking. Yeah. I'm watching. I just break out laughing because it's just like a such on the nose like middle school put down, and it's just like it was great. And the movie itself, like stuff like this is a target rich environment. There's just so many,
I mean that stuff's great. Yeah.
Or even like the iconic like I feel the need for speed.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah,
it's like it's corny, but it's great. It's
yeah.
hilarious. It's like, so I mean, some people would say this is a failure of the original, but I think it's one of the things that
Hmm.
makes it really good. Whereas Top Gun Maverick, you know, you can't really, I mean, it was a product of its time, Top Gun. If you made something that was that corny today, it would just immediately jump out at people how corny it was. It wouldn't
It would
work.
be affected.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So like, yeah, it couldn't be corny like that. But I mean, that to me was part of the charm. So on that score, aesthetically, I give it to the original. But beyond that, and this sounds kind of counterintuitive because something that is kind of like unintentionally cheesy, you would think would not have deep character development, deep characterization. But it to me, it absolutely did. Maverick's relationship with Goose was like, and it's powered by powerful performances by Anthony Edwards, who plays Goose, and Val Kilmer, who plays Iceman,
Yeah.
Maverick's relationship with Iceman, Maverick's romance relationship with Kelly McGinnis, and even his relationship with Goose's wife. Not that they slept together, they did
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
but Meg Ryan. And they it's just like his scenes with Iceman, his scenes with Goose, his scenes with Kelly McGinnis, they're iconic. And they're like, I remember from Top Gun, I remembered Maverick, Tom Cruise, but I also remembered Iceman just as well. I remembered Goose just as well.
Hmm.
And yeah, and Charlie, Kelly McGinnis. From Maverick, I'm not gonna really remember anyone besides, Maverick.
Yeah. I
No
mean,
one
I,
else
I would
impressed me on that level.
I would give props to Miles Teller. I'm something of a
Yeah,
fan.
he did a good job.
But I hear what you're saying. Yeah, and you said, Top Gun Maverick does a good job of not being woke. It is pretty unwoke, save for the, you do have a female pilot in there, of course. Um, but it's in some of the characters, and I bring that up now because some of the characters, including her and some of the other sort of diversity elements, and I'm not even saying this because we're new right and we're anti woke or whatever. A lot of them did feel, as you said, a little bit cookie cutter, definitely. Just like
Yeah,
token, yeah, but not even just tokens like diversity tokens, also just like kind of just there, and then you have this,
yeah.
I'm trying to remember the actor's name. He's a good actor, he has a good presence, but the blonde guy who's
Was that
clearly,
Dan Stevens?
no, his name is something else. But he's clearly
Hmm.
sort of an Iceman stand-in, and Miles Teller is obviously something of
Yeah,
I guess a stand-in for both the Tom
Goose
Cruise and
and
also Goose from Israel. And again, I do find Miles Teller to be somewhat more three-dimensional, but the rest of them were a little more, yeah, cookie cutter. And then this is not a, I'm sure Jennifer Connelly is going to listen to this and get offended, but I don't even, nothing against her, but yeah, that I guess the romance there. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to, again, in a way that we're reflecting life. It's hard to date at that age. It's hard to at Tom Cruise's age, at her age, like it's probably hard to generate that kind of passion in real life too. So, but that romance wasn't on par with the take my breath
yeah,
away moments in the original. But look, that's also kind of a high bar. But I'm circulating the point that I hear what you're saying on the character development. I do think it's definitely an interesting ride for Tom Cruise's character from Maverick, and again, props to Miles Teller, good performance there. But
yeah,
the rest, and then even like John Hamm, who I also enjoy as like a Mad Men fan, good actor, but even that character pretty stock. Like I think
yeah,
John Hamm did as good of a job playing him as one could, but it's pretty much just the stock, stick up the ass military guy.
yeah,
So from that perspective, yeah, I think there was a certain, for the original had a little more passion behind it with regard to some of that characterization stuff. I don't disagree.
yeah. This is going to seem like a kind of academic point, even, but I think it bears mentioning that when we say that it's woke or tokenism to have a female fighter pilot, that's not just because, like, you know, we think like, oh, fighter pilots have to be tough men and they have to, you know, like a woman is too weak or whatever. No, men and women have, as you know, everyone who listens to this pod probably knows, very different brains. And the male brain has a much larger capacity for visual spatial recognition and computation. And that, of course, is, and the female brain has a larger portion devoted to social understanding and stuff of that nature. So that it's not like, you know, one sex is better than the other. But when it comes to flying planes, you need to have very good visual spatial skills. So yeah, one sex definitely is better than the other at flying planes. And that is men. Men are better at flying planes than women. And so if you're going to be flying a fucking F-18 or an F-22, which costs like $500 million, you want to have, you know, people who are really good at flying planes flying them. So that's why it's very rare to have female fighter pilots. It's very rare to have female pilots in general. But a fighter pilot, you have to be extremely skilled. Like landing on an aircraft carrier. Oh yeah, that's insane. You're going in probably at, like, you know, you're going hypersonic, of course. But then, like, as you're slowing down, you're still probably approaching the aircraft carrier at like over 200 miles an hour, I would think. You know, maybe a lot more. And like an aircraft carrier is what? It can't be much longer than 100 yards, probably much less than 100 yards. So you know, you have to be able to land on a very short runway, as so short that they actually have metal cables that you have to land and land in the right way so the tail of your plane snags these fucking cables. Yeah. So they slow you down so you don't fly off roll off the aircraft carrier. Yeah, no. And so yeah, you got to be an excellent pilot to do this stuff. You got to be a Top Gun. Mm-hmm. And frankly, you know, women just can't, you know, it would be a great rarity to have a woman who could do this. Yeah, no, I'd actually like to see, like, I don't know what the real life equivalent of the Top Gun program would be, but yeah, I don't think there's many women in it. But we kind of, I mean, maybe there's one. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, like, there's only one in the movie, but yeah, I'm not I'm not too convinced. But we sort of talked about this as like and this happens, I'm trying to think of an example. This kind of happens with other media as well. There's kind of like, it's basically a movie that aims at middle America. So they're not going to be too woke. And I think that Top Gun Maverick's an example of this, but they're going to be a little bit woke because of the times or whatever. And the meeting kind of halfway can sometimes be unintentionally sort of symbolically based. Now, based is the wrong word. I don't want to give the movie too much credit, but we did sort of comment that, yeah, there's a female pilot and a number of other, you know, obviously purposely diverse pilots. And that is realistic, by the way. Of course, there's a lot of non-white people in the military, but, you know, in the context of the movie, it's a little bit obvious that they were trying to have, you know, different groups represented. But what becomes unintentionally, base is the wrong word, but unintentionally non-woke, shall we say, is that at the end of the day, the movie is still about Tom Cruise, and it's also still about Miles Teller in the new one. It's about, you know, a sort of quasi paternal relationship with a younger guy. So it's very male, and, you know, it's Goose's son, so he's going to be white. Basically, long story short, not to spoil it for anyone, but the two main people who carry out the mission, and I'll say more about the mission in a second, because I think that the technical level of that is very well done in Top Gun Maverick. But the two people who ultimately carry out the mission and ultimately are the biggest heroes are the two straight white. Oh, forget straight, but I mean, yes, probably. Well, Tom Cruise straight. That's a whole other story. But ostensibly straight white guys are the main heroes, and the woman, the black guy, whatever else, they kind of play, even if it's a highly skilled mission, so they're all heroes, but they do, technically speaking, play a supporting role, which is kind of intentionally non-woke in its symbolism. Yeah, no, I mean, what one of the reasons I appreciate Top Gun Maverick so much is that they clearly made a choice to prioritize storytelling over political correctness, to prioritize storytelling over wokeness.
Yeah.
Because in that scene at the end, when Maverick has to pick a partner to fly the mission with, to be his wingman in the mission, he picks Goose's son. And sorry for the spoiler, but
I mean, it is. I guess some people care about that, so I don't know. Should we put a warning on? I don't know.
I guess we'll do a spoiler.
And as far as there's any spoilers in Top Gun, I guess that would be one. But whatever. That's
so he picks Goose's son, and that was the correct dramatic choice. Of course, that was not the correct equity choice or diversity choice. If we're to go by the rules of New Hollywood, if you're going to have the straight white guy as the hero, you damn sure better have his partner be at least a minority, at least a BIPOC. But if not that, a woman or a sexual deviant, or some other form of supposedly disadvantaged person, and they didn't do that. They had minorities, Hispanics flying one of the planes, and a woman and a geeky white guy flying one of the other planes. And so they actually, the minorities in this context played a supporting role to the two white men who essentially saved the day. But that was dramatically the way it had to be, because the whole point of the movie was the catharsis that would be achieved and was achieved between Maverick and Goose's son, because in the original Maverick is, he's so much of a maverick that sometimes he flies poorly, and when he flies poorly, people die. So his wingman Goose died when Maverick, kind of screwed the pooch a little bit. And so his son, ironically, in the movie, his son doesn't hold a grudge about that. It's unclear. Maybe that was never communicated to him, that it was kind of Maverick's fault.
Well, actually, not to get lost in the weeds of this, because it's not the most relevant thing, but you kind of at the beginning of the movie, they seem to imply that he was angry about that, but then they sort of pivoted away.
Oh, true.
But there was at least one line about him not seeing it the same way that Maverick did, or something. Anyway, not to get lost in the weeds of that, he resents him for a number of reasons. The main one being that he held his career back at the behest of his mother. But anyway, we don't need to rehash the plot. But yes, no, they
don't see eye to eye.
They don't.
But nevertheless, he is if Maverick is not a father figure to Goose's son, then certainly, I think his name is Bradley in the movie, then certainly Goose's son Bradley is a kind of surrogate son to Definitely. Maverick feels like an attachment to him, an obligation to protect him. And he wants to make good on his mistake for, rightly or wrongly, he blames himself for the death of Goose, the kid's father. And so the dramatic thrust of this movie is his coming to terms with letting Goose's son fly dangerous missions, and possibly like Maverick really, he thinks he got Goose killed. Maybe he did. But he so because of that, he really, really doesn't want to also get Goose's son killed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And but he realized the catharsis of this is he realizes that it's not right of him to hold the son back and to protect him. That part of being a man and part of being a maverick is you gotta take chances, you gotta roll the dice, and that is man's highest form, is to be a maverick. And so he lets Goose's son be the maverick he was born to be. And, and that is what the writers needed to do. But if the writers played by the woke playbook, that would never happen. It would have just
as you said,
some BS, alternative story.
Yeah. And that's one thing that the new one has that's a good natural development out of the first one. The first one is about being a young man and mostly jockeying for status among other young men, whereas the new one does a pretty good job at a not anti-masculinist job, which is commendable. Is a low bar, but it's still commendable, of exploring sort of issues related to being a middle-aged to older man, having a son. In this case, Tom Cruise actually doesn't have a son, but he has a surrogate sort of, son figure, and delves into that relationship. And as you said, the whole element of letting go, absolutely the right storytelling choice. They could have made another choice involving Maverick, kind of training up the next BIPOC, or I guess female generation, which they slipped in a little bit, but the main storytelling was that it had to be about this, about masculinity at core. That, I guess, if I had to sum up, what's commendable about Top Gun Maverick, it's that it's still of its moment. It's not really pissing off the woke crowd, but it's still a movie that is at core about masculinity, I really think. And they had the integrity to stick to that element of storytelling and make it about Maverick and make it about Maverick's relationship with the character of Rooster, Goose's son. Yeah,
absolutely. And today, watching the movie today, it's probably not the intention of the filmmakers to imply this, but we've discussed in the notes, there is a certain implication that Tom Cruise has been held back. He has not advanced in his career. And, if this is a movie that is actually about America today, well, we know who the top brass in the military is and are. And so it suggests, and maybe, I think we're reading more into it than there is actually there.
Yeah.
But it's suggestive of the fact that, in order to rise through the ranks today, you can't be a maverick, and because you have to get with the program, and the program is it's the GAE. It's
global homo. Well, this is something I don't think it's a reach to talk about that. I think it's to give the movie too much credit to think it's really delving into that, because it's not. It's still a pro-military movie. I'm sure the top brass and the mill Twitter people are all a fan, and ultimately the whole top brass versus lower ranking officers comes down to like, oh, they have a stick up their ass, and like, you got and Maverick's too much of a Maverick. That's what it comes down to. That being said, couldn't help but think of something that someone like Samuel Finley, author of Breakfast of the Dirt Cult, who we got to get on this pod, but that's another story.
Definitely do.
Something that I've heard him talk about on BAP's program and elsewhere, about how, there's this kind of known in the military that if you really want to rise to the top brass, you have to kind of drink the Kool-Aid, and he had a word for it that I forget, but basically buy into some element of global homo, and that's kind of this known thing among, like, that there's a lot of very cool captains.
You got a cuck, basically.
And you just got to swallow a lot of bullshit, which is kind of true in a lot of industries, but it's even more concerning. I mean, we're timing this with the beginning of Pride Month, and there was something circulating on Twitter earlier where the Marine Corps posted some Pride thing about.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing, like, we both work in the entertainment industry, and like, obviously it's very woke. But, like, well, you're making movies, you're like, it's not the most, like, it could be a very masculine thing, but, it's not something that is like stereotypically so. But when you have like the military doing this type of stuff, it's like, we're gonna get killed in wars. You can't have these type of guys trying to fight wars. They'll, who knows what the fuck they'll do.
Definitely. And like,
I don't think they're going to be very brave. I'll tell you that much.
Well, Top Gun doesn't highlight that, but again, it's really just the more traditional thing, which you also get a little bit in the original, where it's like, oh, you get to stick up your ass higher up in the military. You lose that maverick fighting spirit. that's more where it comes at. That's the more the angle that it comes from in the movie. But again, I listened to enough of people like Samuel Finley and Josiah Lippincott and some of these other sort of based military and ex-military guys that impossible not to think about that, or at least, it's kind of fun to project that onto the movie, shall we say. Fun to imagine Maverick as standing against that. We don't get a lot of it explicitly, but that dynamic is at least addressed. It's that was the main scene that I thought was really good fodder for this conversation. It's mostly just one scene at the beginning where Maverick is sort of chewed out by this older officer for having never risen the ranks, and he says, "Well, I'm happy as a decorated captain. I'm where I need to be." Also, the same scene with that line we mentioned earlier, where he said, he's called a dying breed, and he says, "I may be, but I'm not going to go extinct today," which obviously one could read any number of political messaging into that. But yeah.
Yes, crucially, he's being replaced. He mentioned he'll be replaced by machines. Yes. And machines will fly. But, people have been talking a lot about replacement these days, Matt. I don't know if you've heard. But,
oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
This perhaps, unintentionally hits upon a theme near and dear to the hearts of many of our listeners.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, absolutely. The notion of replacement, that, there's controversial ideas about replacement, obviously, but there's even some this kind of down the pipeline. You mentioned even like the automation thing. I'm not giving like an Andrew Yang reading of Top Gun Maverick, but just the whole notion of masculinity, shall we say, being replaced, or even demographic replacement. This is kind of, I think, high. If we want to get Freudian about it, I think for a lot of people it's sort of more unconscious. It's not like they're thinking about it all the time, but it's this theme underlying a lot of interest with the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that I mentioned too. There is that theme, like this kind of masculinity, this kind of white masculinity is kind of on the chopping block and getting replaced. And, you have people obviously that get really political about it and they're absolutely demonized. But I think that even a lot of normie audiences, and I think even a lot of the normie audiences that are watching Top Gun Maverick are kind of getting that message. Like, oh, maybe it's a shame that people like Tom Cruise, aren't really going to be so visible or in control of anything in 10, 15 years. I think it does work on that level. I don't think that's the intention of the filmmakers. I don't think they're saying that's like the political be all end all, but it's aesthetically there when you have that scene, where Tom Cruise is described as a dying breed, and it's not presented as a good thing in the movie. And I think a lot of, again, even the normie and even some of the liberal audiences will kind of be able to appreciate the degree to which that is not cause for celebration. And but
I think it's absolutely there.
Yeah. For our side, that's where, this isn't like a Joker moment. It's not like a Blade Runner 2049 moment where like everyone on our corner of Twitter is like, celebrating this movie. But, you do have some, I think Josh Lacash, I don't even know that much about who he is, but I know he has a, podcast. There's some people who are really, saying that we should, support this movie, go see it. And I think that it's warranted just by that kind of aesthetic. Again, not to give it too much credit to say that it's really hammering these points home, but aesthetically, something to be celebrated.
Yeah, this is not an Our Guys movie, but what it is something that I think is almost more rare. Well, no, that's not. There's no Our Guys movies, so that would be the most rare. But this is something that is very special, and it is a throwback to an earlier, more optimistic period in American history. It's a throwback to the original Top Gun.
Yeah.
And when I was watching it in the theater, me, everyone who listens to the pod knows me and has a good sense of my opinions on most everything. Mm-hmm. And so I am not at the moment predisposed to feel fondly toward American empire. And so American military victories are not something that I'm like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, we're going to plant the rainbow flag and colonize the world. That's just not, not for me. But nevertheless, watching this, and it was because it was a celebration of Maverick, who's a cultural hero, a celebration of Maverick's America. And there was just something about like his teamwork and the kind of like, the heroic way they, ended the movie, the heroic way they escaped their, again, a spoiler, but come on,
Oh yeah. And by the way, this is maybe a good time for me to slip to say it's kind of a banal comment but at the end of the day, we're talking about a movie that's a pretty badass action movie. The action sequence at the end of Top Gun Maverick is great. It's very well worth seeing. If we're talking about, I don't think there needs to be a comparison between the original and the new one, but if there's one thing where maybe even you, Dan, would agree, the flying and the action in the original is great, but even just like the technological advances that we've had since then, really breathtaking stuff, no pun intended.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's an incredible action movie. The action is great, suspenseful. The cinematography
and just the set pieces at the end are, it's like the first time you saw Star Wars or something. It's like seeing the spaceships and that, again, kind of feels a little Reddit and whatever to talk about this, but no, it's really quite a lot of fun and very well done. And I just want to add that that alone is also a good reason to see it.
Yeah. So that of course is a very important part. But I'm in the theater, and despite my predilections to not be a big fan of GAE, I was cheering. I was like I was moved, and Definitely. By the end I was like fuck yeah. I was all in. And I was not only all in on Maverick, I was like, I felt the sense of patriotism. And, that, quickly disappeared as, the day went on and I read the news. But in that moment, I had a sense of pride. And, who knows, maybe through art and culture, we can help bring it back. Maybe, our next great Caesar will come and bring it back. The field is wide open. And
Definitely.
I'm excited.
Yeah. No, that's another obviously important part of the context of which is coming. It's during this Ukraine conflagration, and it is a moment in which certain powers that be would like us to, become more pro-military and whatnot. The movie's not being promoted that way per se, but it's definitely part of the context of this summer and the summer that this movie is coming out during. And again, my opinions on a lot of that haven't changed. But as I said at the beginning, it's like if people want to stoke a certain kind of patriotism with the movie, I won't necessarily stand in the way. I think patriotism is good. I hope that, as you said, in time, that we can work out something alternative to a simple loyalty to, what certain of our guys would call like the shadow class or the infiltrator class at the top. I'm not patriotic towards those people, but there's a lot of stuff going on right now, kind of politically and nationally. Perhaps the Ron DeSantis of it all. Maybe there could be some kind of new American patriotism that is, it's not going to be totally based in red pill, but is better than what we have now, and that can work in some of the nostalgia that one would get from watching a movie like Top Gun or even this new Top Gun.
Absolutely. So civic nationalists, take note. If you watch this movie, this is the type of stuff you need to do if you want to create a real civic nationalism, if you want to, make that happen, because people need a story. They need to be moved.
They need heroes,
They need heroes. Yeah. And
we don't have that type of stuff.
Yeah. And, you need to create a compelling counter narrative to the narrative of wokeness and what have you. And that's very difficult to do because of capture of the institutions and everything. Mm-hmm. And, to an extent, the right is a little splintered in this regard, civic nationalism or something else. And, if you want to really sell civic nationalism, you gotta win over some of the woke people. You gotta convince, or if not the woke people, the normies.
Exactly, the normies.
Them that this is the way to go, and it really shouldn't be so hard. So it's Top Gun. If it could move me, it could move
Right.
lots of people.
I think so, and I think that's another good way of putting it. Again, it's not an our guys movie, quote unquote, but it is and not to sound like some kind of paternalistic or moralistic person here, but it is a wholesome movie for normies. I would say it promotes the right sort of values. I think. Yeah.
It is an edifying movie for normies.
It is, yeah,
promoting the values that we want them.
Exactly. And even if it does come during a moment where those values could be directed in the wrong direction in terms of America's role on the global stage, that's always been an issue. But there's also always been something, I think, redemptive in patriotism and in even militarism. It's often been bad, but in and of itself should be good.
Yeah. I mean, with guys like Maverick at the helm, we could maybe we could win some of these wars.
Right. That'll be the day. But yes.
Well, on that note, I think it's a pretty good place to wrap it up, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. People should join the rest of America and see Top Gun Maverick.
Do it. See the movie, people.